quarter in your sample books at the end. So this is the time to start because you're starting to have something to take pictures of. Take pictures of your dye, take pictures of everything. I've never met a costume technician who didn't wish that they took better pictures of their process, because someone will ask, how did you get there? And you'll be trying to find the words when actually that picture would do it a lot faster. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Practice those process portfolio skills. Take pictures of everything, yeah?
Yes.
Sure. So the next step that we are all going to have is to actually cut our pattern pieces that we've made, hello, out of our fabric. And we're going to talk about a couple things. 5. So you're going to start with a big chunk of fabric. And the one thing that we're going to want to do is make sure that our actual grain line that we have marked on our pattern pieces, or we may not have marked yet, is on the straight of grain of the fabric itself. Does anyone remember when we talked about how to find the straight of grain or what it is? Yeah.
Well, one thing you can do is usually it will rip.
Yeah.
Rip on the straight of grain, so you can do a little snipping.
A little snip and rip. Yes, we love it.
Snip and rip.
The snip and rip. So anything that's a woven fabric, which is the only kind of fabric that's going to have a straight of grain, is going to do the rip. We love the rip. It's going to rip on the grain line, so you know where it is. If you ever have like a jaggedly cut piece of fabric or something, the first thing you want to do is usually just rip the edge off so that you have a straight line to work with. And it will rip the other way too, as long as I do. So it'll rip along the work and the weft either way. Your straight of grain line on your pattern, you can line up with either of those things depending on which fits best for the piece of fabric that you have in front of you. In this case, we're probably using the actual straight, but the perpendicular straight, if we think of how things are woven. This way, the actual straight is the strongest sort of structural part of the fabric. The other way is like the second strongest, so it's kind of a toss-up. You can do either one. They both have a bias, which is the flexy part of it. So they're both going to work. Did we talk about bias at all? I can't remember.
A little bit.
A little bit. So bias is the diagonal. So if I tug this way, it doesn't have a lot of give, right? If I tug this way, it has 0 give. There's nothing there. If I tug this way, we have a lot of give. We use those things strategically. So for example, if I was making something for like the top of the torso, I want my structure line, which is the sort of hardiest, most solid, most durable parts of the fabric, to be on my structure points, such as at my waist or at my shoulders. And I want the things that are going to be on the bias, anywhere else pretty much, to be on the curves of the body, because they're going to be more malleable, they're going to act a little bit more flexible, they're going to make better curves in general. And then we also have bias cut items, which are deliberately cut, so we would drape instead of like this, usually how we garment things, we drape like this, and you get a little bit more of like a soft sculptural flow to things. Can be pretty pain in the ass, huge pain in the ass, but also super fun. You either love or hate bias cut draping. So when we're actually going into our fabric land, which you can do, reminder that you can dye either as a whole thing if you wanted to, or you can dye after your garment is complete, or you can dye pretty much any time in between. The only catch is that the dyeing and then washing and drying process is going to be not super nice to these edges. So that's something to think about in terms of like how you budget your time. You might have to air dry it if you still have edges showing, stuff like that. Make sense? So usually what we want to do is we want to fold him long ways. So I'm not going to fold him over like this, I'm going to fold him like this, and I'm going to line up my actual selvage edges. The selvage edge is the raw edge of the fabric where the actual like goods of the fabric are, right? You can see that? This is the selvage. That is always going to be the straight of grain. That is your parallel line. So if I'm making this boy, in theory, I've given myself 2 things if I fold it like this. I've given myself 2 edges of straight of grain, so I could use this as a straight of grain, and I can use this as a straight of grain. Make sense so far?
Mm-hmm.
I can know that this is my bias if I were cutting something on the bias, and I've also given myself a fold, which we've talked about a little bit in terms of the skirts. So now if I were going to, no, freedom. If I were going to make the skirt piece, these are my 2 grain lines that we talked about last class. This is my fold line in the center. It's also my center line of the piece. So if I wanted to do this kind of the quickest and easiest way, I would just fold this here. And as long as it's right here and here, it's going to create a straight line. And I would put him right here. I would grab those dudes. Can somebody hand me that if anybody's reach?
Yes.
My tack collection. And I would get him in here and make sure that he is stuck down so he can't wiggle off on me. Good news, we're starting deliberately with a pretty user-friendly fabric. So this is not gonna like move off on you too much, but if you're working with something even a little bit more slippery, when you start to do this, you're gonna see the two pieces, like the two folded pieces kind of go like, and it's, yeah. So be aware, cotton and wools and most natural fibers have a little bit of like a stick to them, like a tack to them. They have, the actual structure of the fiber has like little claws, like little bits to it that will stick them together a little bit better versus synthetic fabrics are like very smooth. It's plastic threads. And then what I would do is I would grab my marking tool. I recommend a pencil. You can do what you want, but I would recommend a pencil. Right now I'm going to use a pen to make sure that we can see it. I might even use a marker just to make sure that it's like visible, especially in there. And you're just going to go around the edges of this, the same way that you did on your paper. You're going to mark out the exact pattern piece that you've cut. If we were in the land of like more advanced patterning, which we're not, we would spend some more time truing up exactly how straight our edges are, and we would spend more time kind of perfecting these pattern pieces themselves before we went into fabric. And then I have like some little gaps here, right? Because I had a sticky out bit, I would just take my straight edge and fill those in. Then, would you hand me one of those, boys? Yes. Everybody has one of these or can have one of these. They're over there. This boy is going to be your friend because what he's going to do is help you create your seam allowance, which is something that everybody's going to need. So once you have your exact pattern piece traced out on here, this little dude right here, when you move him, he's going to basically stick in place. It's a great hem tool. If I want to hem something up by an inch, I can just mark it this way and I don't have to like remeasure every time. It's just going to kind of be like, here's where the line is, right? And we can use this the exact same way for something like this. You have a choice. You can either do half-inch seam allowance or you can do full-inch seam allowance. That is up to you, depending on how confident you feel of your alterations and your measurements. I see like 3 sleep people and some horror, and I love it. Good, we're all here. It's fine. So I would just go around, and I'm using this little red dude, right, this boy, where I want him to be, and I can move him up here if I wanted him to be a half-inch, if I wanted to work with a smaller seam allowance. Bigger seam allowance, pros and cons. The bigger seam allowance is going to give you more room if something is too small, you want to let something out. Smaller seam allowance is going to look neater at the end of the day. It's just going to look a little bit prettier on the inside, but you can always trim it down later. Yeah, not really a big difference there. Commercial patterns always use 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Nobody else on earth ever uses that. Just commercial patterns use that. Why? I don't know. Because we can't standardize things, because that would make it too easy. And then I would go and I would grab my straight edge. Not this one, this is the spawn of the devil.
Oh, silly. You can't
I
do
don't know
Oh my
why it
God.
exists. And then I would go in here and I would just create this new line. You want both lines. So if anybody is ever actually drafting a pattern, they draft the actual pattern piece. And then it would be up to the stitcher, whoever is actually putting together the pieces, who is usually a different person than the pattern maker, usually kind of like the lowest level of the manual labor kind of tier. So it would be somebody who's just knows how to stitch, and that's what they do, and that's their job. Somebody creating patterns is going to have sort of a different status in the costume shop usually. They're going to make this. The stitcher would then get to decide, oh, I like to work with half-inch seam allowance, 3/4 inch, an inch, I don't know, a foot, whatever. I don't know why you would need a foot. Actually, I do. Some tailors do. And some of this you can do. This corner doesn't matter a ton, PS, by the way, if you were worried. Ooh. Good time. So you're going to create these. You want both of these lines. This is the line that you'll stitch on. This is the line that you'll cut on. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes. Stitching, cutting. This is where we're going to pin. So that is the cutting. Once you have that traced out, you can go ahead and cut on your cut line and make sure that you're leaving this line as it is, because you're going to use it later. To be able to mark your straight of grain, which is on the pattern, so you can line the patterns back up to your own pieces if you haven't marked these already, you're going to grab any of the wheelie dudes. Literally any of them. They're all slightly different, but they'll all work the same. And here's another one. This boy, any of these, there's a whole bucket of them in there, so we can grab the whole bucket if we need it. This is like a wax transfer paper. So if I put him down facing the thing I want to be marked, and the thing that already has the mark on top of that. So the color faces the thing that wants a mark or needs it marked. Go in with the wheelie boy. Wheel across, end up with a line. Can we kind of see that? I don't know how well the camera can see that, but I believe it's there. Have faith. And then I would usually, just to be sure, or one would usually, just to be sure. I would? No, I totally wouldn't. I know that I can see this, so I absolutely would not do that. But you should go in and mark it. Just to make sure that if somebody else came along, because usually in a costume shop, we're thinking like, I might not get to finish my own project. It might get handed off to someone else. That's usually part of the process. So I want to make sure that anything that I'm doing is clear enough that somebody else could pick it up if they needed to and not wonder what the heck. So little arrows just mean that this is the parallel line of the straight of grain, which on this is actually this. I just marked this to show us. So it just means, just like in math class, it means it keeps going. The straight of grain goes on forever. It means that it's not a pattern marking, it's just the grain. Yeah, questions, concerns, figures? Okay.
People watching the video, do you have any questions?
The invisible gremlins inside the phone. Yes, we do. Okay, so if we were starting to cut out our fabric now, we would feel chill about this. We would feel ready with this piece.
Yes.
Sure.
Sure, okay. You love the confidence. Awesome. Go ahead and pause that video because that's the end of that piece. Redo that, just in case.
Yep.
So you have a range of embellishments. The one thing we're trying to avoid is glue. Specifically hot glue, which is the urge when you kind of like, it's like, oh God, it's due tomorrow, better just hot glue this thing. Yes, we all, yes, that's an instinct. It's a very real and valid instinct. In this case, we're gonna try to avoid it. We should have built in enough time to do that. You have some options. You can do it via dye. You can decide to do an ombre. You can decide to do a texture. You can decide to try to do some kind of like shibori or like other actual deliberate pattern that's involved with tying. You can look up different dye effects if you want to. We have all that crap. So if you want to do something like that, have at it. Just start the research because it might take some time to get it right, and you might have to do some samples. You can do it via paint, fabric paint. We have a lot of stuff that's fabric paint related. And you can do it via beading, embellishments down there. You can, if you open any of those cabinets down there, that is trimland. And then the next one over, like that way, is also trimland. There's a ton of trims that you can use if you want to. You can use buttons, which is, Andrew should be like right behind you-ish. In that general vicinity. So if you wanted to, like, if you want your embellishment to be putting on like nice, well done buttons, that's a skill, right? So we're not going to teach every skill that every person might need for an embellishment. It is your job to have an idea of what you would like to execute and be able to communicate to that, to me / the class clearly enough that we know, oh, you need this skill. That's what we're going to teach. Because there's no way to teach every possible style of embellishment, right? So I've heard some people looking at paint, some people looking at beading. All cool. Just got to make sure that we know what it is, and that if you need help or you don't have a skill that you need, you're letting me know so we can teach those. Yeah? Yeah, no glue. Let's try no glue. We know where things are over here. We're going to troop into there super briefly and look at a couple other things that are in there so we know where they are. So we have some locations. We know where stuff is should we need to find it. Over here, literally like right behind Louise. Sorry, Louise. That's brushes. Make sure that you're rinsing them out, make sure that they end up back in there, ideally, all that good stuff. There's disposable ones if you're going to get glue or other like plaster crap, anything like that on there versus the actual paint ones. Down here, rhinestones, beads, all of that good stuff. There's more beads up here. So feel free to dig through and see if you find something that you want to put on your stuff. We talked about this a little bit, but I want to make sure that I'm not getting emails like at midnight at night being like, where the heck are the things? Down here, it's happened. You know it's happened. You know. Down here is all of the paint stuff. So, one thing that I want to point out, there's fabric paint, there's leather paint, there's acrylic paint, and there's some other crap. All good stuff, but over here, you're good. This boy is called textile medium. this is going to be one of your best friends if you're going to go with anything paint related. The reason why is because if you mix this with an acrylic paint, if say the best color is an acrylic paint that you want to use, and you mix this, it's going to become a flexible fabric paint. Cool story. Works really well. Awesome stuff. We have like 8 bottles of it, so feel free to have at that because it'll give you access to more colors than we have here. What's the difference between fabric paint and acrylic paint? Do we know? Any guesses?
I think the sorry, Franny, you go.
No, go for it.
I was gonna say that the flexibility of the paint.
Yeah.
It's dry.
So there's 2 things you can't ever, well, there's 3 things you can't ever use acrylic for. One is silicone because it won't stick. Nothing sticks to silicone. Silicone's inert. You have to use other silicone to do anything on silicone. If you ever take a prosthetics class with me, it's a whole other story. 2 is latex. Latex is stretchy, so if you're ever doing anything with latex acrylic paint, once it's on there, it'll just crack as it pulls apart, and as the latex ages. Same with elastic, anything that has that sort of like stretchy nature. Fabric, one, it needs something a little bit thinner because what you want is for the medium to get into the in between fibers a little bit, whereas most acrylic paints are thick enough that they're just sitting on top and they'll peel right off. So a good fabric paint application will have a little bit of, if this was my paintbrush, I could just grab a real paintbrush, but poor Louise is right here. You want to combine these types of gestures with also like a little bit of this type of gesture because you want it to get into those fibers. You don't want it sitting on the top kind of hanging out as a separate layer. That's how it's going to stay on there and have the best longevity. Washable, acrylic paint, not great for washing. This stuff is great for washing, so that's a big thing. You probably want to wash your garment if you ever wear it. I'm just assuming that we do laundry sometimes.
No, that's a good assumption, but you know what they say.
And the flexibility. It's going to ruin the drape of it if you imagine if you've ever spray painted a garment, it makes it like harder and crustier, right? This is going to help a little bit with that the fabric will continue to fall naturally, and it also will crack less as the fabric stretches or moves around. It'll have the flexibility to keep up. So it is important. You will ruin your piece if you just put acrylic paint directly on your fabric. Questions about embellishments, thoughts about embellishments? We're all so like, thank you for that very small woo. The enthusiasm we're all feeling. You can use leather paint on fabric, but don't because it's really expensive. It's not worth it. Yeah.
Can zippers potentially be an option?
For decoration? Absolutely, yeah. Let us troop back out here. Too late. What's gonna happen?
Oh, you said it's on this paper.
Good thing.
I only saw like the front side, not the back side.
Okay, so we're gonna talk about how to the sewing machine.
How to the sewing?
Yeah, how to.
Machine.
Just show of hands. Who I can't remember right now. Who's used a sewing machine has a little bit of we got some comfort, possibly some friends to turn to should there be an emergency. Cool, we've got a starting place. We love that.
Learning how to use a sewing machine would be useful.
One thing that I want to point out, if you learn to sew with commercial patterns, usually what they ask you to do is you will not have that stitching line, which is used in every professional draping shop. It's used in fashion, it's used in costuming. You won't have that. It'll just say, take the pattern piece and sew 5/8 of an inch in from there. We are going to be learning how to sew on your line. That's the dream. So we are going to again use a marker and a straight edge and give ourselves like a little fake mark. And by fake mark, I mean it's going to be a real mark, but it's just there to practice on. It's not like for anything in particular. Quilting rulers give us a really easy inch in if we need them on a straight line. So I can take this boy. This is an inch right here. This is my inch straight line. If I line that up with the edge of the fabric, then I have a really easy, quick, straight line, an inch in on the seam. We love it. Now I can do the same thing on here. Most of the tools that we have are how they are for a reason, and you will grow to love giant clear rulers. Like this is your best friend in the entire world. So we're gonna be specifically working on a stitching line, and I'm gonna grab those balls, and we're gonna migrate over here to this sewing machine. Oh. These are our baby locks. They are our friends. They're very, very well behaved for the most part. Yeah, as best as you can see, and then also Luis is getting close enough to get video, so that'll be available for you too. So, hello, my friend. She's been through a lot with me already. The first thing we have to be able to do is thread the sewing machine. these guys are pretty self-explanatory. The good news is they try to walk you through it for you. So there are actual like little numbers on here. So sticky dude. Sticky dude is where we put the thread. Spool goes there. Little wheel. That's the wheel cap that keeps it from popping off. That's step 1. Then you'll see an actual number 1 over here. And that is telling you this is the first step to threading this machine. And then you're just going to follow the little arrows. Theoretically. Are they perfectly clear and going to make this perfect? But they're doing their best. The good news with machines like this also is if you ever really needed it and this video doesn't help you, finding how to thread a baby lock whatever number on YouTube is going to be pretty easy. Everybody struggled with this baby lock. Yeah. They're what? A baby lock?
Presto 2?
Something. Sure. I believe you. Yeah.
Presto 2.
Spool. And then this is the one, and then you go down and you follow the arrows. And keep following the arrows all the way through. I am going to point out the on and off switch is on the side. It's over here, exactly where you can't see it if you're looking at the sewing machine. Just note that right now. When you hear the funny noise, that means it's on. When the light comes on, that means it's on. So I'm going to keep following these exact arrows. All sewing machines have basically the same structure. So, I mean, I can and I have threaded them with my eyes closed. The tricky one is over here. There's always a little arm, a little silver arm that comes out. And some of them it comes all the way out so you can thread straight through them because you're trying to get through a loop. This one, not so much. So what you have to do is kind of pull your thread all the way to one side and then pull it all the way to the other side and hope that it loops in there, which it did. It's made to be able to do that, but you want to get a little bit of a tug there. You want to like feel it have a tiny bit of resistance. And then we go back down. So we've gone across, down, up, around, all the way down, all the way back up, all the way back down. There's a whole lot of this and this that creates the right tension for the thread to be able to do what he has to do with his life. And then we're going to go down to the actual needle. I just remembered that I broke this needle. Good news, we're getting a surprise tutorial on how to change a needle for when you break one.
Yes.
Yay. This is a machine needle. It has a hole at the bottom. Yay. It has this little dude at the top. You will notice that one side is flat and one side is round. If you can't see it, depending on how your vision is close up, you can feel it with your fingertips. You can feel the flat side. Flat side goes away from you if you are standing at the machine. Flat side goes away from you. This boy, he exists in every machine. Every machine has a little pocket. Secret pockets that have tools like this. Tiny black screw right here. Any of these sides will work. We just got to unscrew him. Puncularis. Get rid of the old one. Throw it away in our sharp spot so that we're not throwing sharp straight into the garbage to attack our custodians if they aren't careful. Anytime you have a broken pin or a broken needle, that's its home. We take him, flat side pointing away from me. We fit him back up there, and this is just kind of like a grope and hope kind of thing. Like you just gotta you gotta find the spot where it's gonna slide in. So I'm sorry, guys. You know what?
I love it. I'm gonna do that.
But you'll remember it forever.
It's true.
And then you're gonna go ahead and screw this back in until it's tight. You want to go tighter than your fingers can screw it. You want to use this because it gives you that extra leverage. But what I mean is that there's no way to look in and try to see where you're putting it. Like there's no way to do that. You just gotta kind of like. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, correct. Correct. And then we're going to actually thread it. So we're using the end of the thread that we've already put through the rest of the machine, and we're going from front to back. What almost always happens, and one of you is going to do probably immediately, is it gets looped around. So it looks like you're going from front to back, but you've actually made like a weird little loop. That's like one of the basic mistakes, right? So make sure, and we'll look at it here, that once we've sent it through, make sure that you're actually looking at it, and you can come see up close if you want to, but you're actually seeing a clean line from up here down to the front hole of the needle and through, not a little loop around, not stuck anywhere. Yeah? The bobbin. We'll talk about threading the bobbin later because I want to make sure that we're saving some brain space for actually working today, and bobbins are terrifying for some people. Which is interesting. So this boy, yes.
I was saying, bobbins are terrible for me.
Yeah, too.
Good.
I was just like,
right now.
So these are nice. You don't have to deal with bobbin casings. You don't have to deal with a lot of stuff. It's just this boy. He's hanging out. We will talk about how to wind him. You want your thread going this way. If I'm like facing, you want your thread like going away from the butt of the machine, if that makes sense. Yeah? You want to lay him flat within his little case. And then there's another arrow to let you know how to do this. The baby locks are trying really hard to help you here. They're doing their best. And he goes through into this little divot and all the way over here until we get to this little divot. Yeah, so through here, bam. Then we're going to grab our top thread, bobbin thread. Top thread, bottom thread also works. This thread, that thread, whatever, but top thread and bobbin thread is technically what they are. This boy is our hand wheel. He will send the needle up and down once as you keep turning. When we send him down once, he picks up the bobbin thread, and if we can see that, we've now got a little loop with our top thread through it. That's how it makes the actual stitch of the machine, but it's what we need to pull the bobbin thread up for the first time. So take a good look at this. Even if you feel like you know what you're doing, take a good look. This is what your sewing machine should look like when it's threaded. You should have two threads that are standing separate, one above the foot, this boy is the foot, and one below the foot, but not in the bobbin. It shouldn't be coming out from this little casing. And in case I just did that too fast, this is like the top to make sure that nothing gets in there, and he just clicks in. It's pretty easy. Also, if you leave him off, no one's going to notice. The machine won't notice. He won't notice. It's fine. Yeah?
Is this sewing snack? In the bobbin case here, like an M&M.
I found, what did I find? I found like somebody's like little like vending machine snacks in one of these at one point. And I was like, I mean, I'm not mad about it, but man.
You see their secret pockets, so I mean. Nobody wants to be sewing while hungry.
It's just when you come across snacks and there's no snacks left, it's just a sad moment, you know? Like why? Why would you do that to someone? Okay. So to actually stitch, we're going to talk about pinning first because we want to make sure that we're pinning on our actual lines. We're going to put right sides together. In this case, doesn't really matter deeply, but it's going to matter in terms of making sure that you aren't making like two of the same pant leg for the same side, right? That's going to be the difference. And I marked this. You'll be able to see through this. Can we kind of see that we can see the line through? Yeah. So what we want to do, and theoretically, because we've marked an inch everywhere, theoretically, if I just lined it up like this, it should line up, right?
Theoretically.
Maybe in carpentry. And actually, this fabric's pretty well behaved, but when you get to curves and stuff like that, it'll tend to get a little bit squigglier. So what you want to do is you want to stick your pin through, and you want to make sure you're sticking it on the line, and make sure that it's actually popping out on the other side on the line. That's the process. And then you're going to pop out into your seam allowance. That is what you want every pin to look like. They should be perpendicular to your stitching line so that you can sew over them if you need to, so that you can flick them out carefully if you need to. We never want to see this, because you will just break all your needles and you will be sad. And your pins and everything else. Everything will get broken. It's fine. So let's just say if, my lines were off, that one went through quite well. So I was like, oh, I'm just pinning this and I'm not really paying it that much attention, and I stick my pin through here and it pops out. God damn it! That was supposed to be wrong!
You're just too good.
That's a dirty lie. So let's say that happened the first time, right? We just erased the experience that we just had. Great. Okay. So what we would want to do, and if it was a slipperier fabric, or if you're on a curve, or for any of the other reasons that this is going to happen to you, because it will, you just want to kind of be like, we know it's in the right spot here. Pop them out so that your fabrics are separated. Find that spot. Snap them back together. And then kind of look at the whole thing and be like, is there a wrinkle? Are they lining up nicely? You don't want to try to force fabric to do something it doesn't do. So if your fabric's lumping up somewhere, it's telling you something, right? It's not a mistake. It's sending you a message about what it needs to be doing. So if I had like a little lump in here, I would say, oh, one of these, I've just like squinched it up so that it's wrong. I would lay it back out. This is your friend, just kind of going over it with your hands and making sure that it's all laid out nicely by touch. And then I would go ahead and pin it like this. So you want this process on everything, yes? And then we stitch. So these babes, one thing that they have over here is the speed control, which I think we've mentioned before, which is this zoomy boy. If you're an absolute beginner, start with the 1. Go to the 2, go to the 3. I like the 3. It just bothers me less. But that's because I'm very caffeinated. And then when you're practicing, I would recommend using a contrast thread, like a brighter color or something. Putting white on white as you're practicing or something equivalent is going to be harder for you to identify your own mistakes and look at it and see whether it's coming out nicely. Does that make sense? Use something obvious as you're practicing.
Okay.
This is a zipper foot. Doesn't matter what foot you're using. The machines have kind of a variety. You want to be able to tell where your needle is. So I'm raising my needle up and down and making sure that it's actually going through its first stitch on my actual line. Back here, this is the foot presser. You never want to ever start stitching until you hear that noise. Yeah? Okay. You want to see why?
I have also done this before. My mom
Good
was
news.
so mad at me.
We have a digital interface. All it's going to do is beep at you and say E01 over and over, which is the only error code that it knows. No matter what's wrong, that's what it's going to say to you. But it won't go.
Right.
What it will do if we didn't have a digital interface, if you're ever using any of the Berninas in there, which you can take home with you if you want to, you can check those out and take home. Or like the industrial, which I don't think I'm ever going to put you guys on because it will hurt you. You want to make sure that you are not doing that because it will try to sew and you will end up with a giant ratty mess of thread that will just be not the dream. Okay, so you're going to line it up and your goal is to stitch on the line. You're not trying to follow any of these marks over here, which may have been, if you've been trained in sewing, how you were trained to follow these marks to the edge. This edge doesn't matter. It doesn't exist. It's not real. This is the garment. Seam allowance at the end of the day doesn't matter. You're going to trim it down. You're going to hide it. You're going to do stuff with it. It is spare parts. Okay? So we're going to go forward a little bit. Chunk, chunk, chunk. And then there's a little button up here, right above the stop button, that allows us to go backwards. Now we're going to go backwards a little bit. An inch, a few stitches, sometimes a couple stitches. You just want to anchor it back and forth once to make sure that it's not going to slip straight out. And you'll notice that I just sewed right over that pin. That's one of the reasons that we do it perpendicularly, so that we can do that. You can also flick them out as you go. It is easier, and I will point this out to you right now, it is easier if your pin head is towards your dominant hand. So I'm right-handed. If I had done it like this, where my pin head was pointed towards the outside, towards the seam allowance, it's much easier for me, if I wanted to, if I was worried about hitting that pin or had a lot of pins in there just to be sure, to come up here and just like with my dominant hand finger, just go like whoop, right? As opposed to trying to get it from over here, which is what you'll instinctively do, as this hand is, your non-dominant hand is going to be more useless for that. Bum, bum. And then when we get to the end, do that stitch again for a little chunk of time. These machines will usually, not all of them, and I don't know why because they're all the same model, so I don't know what that programming is, but usually they'll end with the needle down automatically. They'll just put the needle back down. Raise them up with your wheel, bring up the foot, pull him free. Get better scissors than this. And then you always want to end with a chunk of tail. More thread over here is better. If you have just a little bit too little, it'll like spin upwards and like loop out of the needle. And then as the pressure of the sewing machine applies, it'll just unthread the whole thing. You just got to do it again, which is just annoying. It's not bad. It's just annoying. So just like, don't let it. Be better than the machine. You're the boss of the machine. Sometimes. And then you can trim off your excess threads. Some people trim them all off at the end. Some people trim them as they go. I'm just really mad that these scissors exist. If you can't cut thread, you have no business here.
I think I have a pair of scissors in my locker.
No, we're good. It's good enough for now. And what we want to end up with is even all of that purple is gone, right? Nice clean seam. We love it. We don't love this. This is where I didn't pin it at all, and I just kind of kept going. We don't love this, right? Can we see what we don't love? So, this is like not horrendous, but it is in terms of what we're trying to train you for, which is being able to walk into a professional costume shop and say, hey, I can do this entry-level job. This is the difference between an A and a B, okay? If you're cool with the B, go for it. I'm not going to judge you for that. But like that's that's totally your life. You need like what, a B minus for like major credit or something, I think. You know your GPA needs. I don't care. But I am telling you, like, I'm giving you the context that this is the difference between an A and a B. This is the A, this is the B. Does that help us have context for that?
Yes.
Yep.
If you're starting to get really wonky or you just have like weird jaggedy stuff, and that's a whole different range. But like this is like, did you do it really perfect or did you kind of do it and it's technically okay? Yeah?
Get artsy with it.
B,
And an A.
yeah, perfect. Thank you. And then, because the most important part of sewing is secretly the iron. You have to press everything. Because right now what we have, and these are 100% cotton, right now what we have is like a perfectly nice seam. It's nice and straight and clean and pretty. And it looks good for having like black friggin' thread on white flannel. But what we want is to press every seam open. This will realign the fibers, kind of like heat curling or heat straightening the hair. It's going to tell the fibers where they want to be. It's going to keep them there more permanently, and it's going to make that seam nicer in every possible way. So we go here, we grab this boy, we give him a good scooch. All of these irons do work. We'll talk a little bit more about iron safety on Thursday, and then see what we have. See how that helps it vanish a little bit?
Ooh,
Like
pretty.
that seam was never there. I mean, not really, but I wish. And then later on, you can decide what to do with your extra. We'll talk about some different techniques to get rid of or to decide what to do with your excess here. Because there are decorative ways to do it, and there are just cut it off ways to do it. But this is what you want to end up with. Should you ever be experiencing some really stubborn fabric that is not allowing you to make that nice press, give him some water. We're not going to use these. We don't need the actual steamers up here because they are like extra. These are industrial pressers. Hear that nice hiss? That fiber is not going anywhere now. And that will work on fabrics that it's hard to. These are natural fibers, so they are pretty iron friendly unless you're actually just leaving that iron on there and like going to get lunch. Like, you're going to be okay. You don't have to worry about it melting or anything or burning as long as you keep it moving and you're not just literally like putting it down there. Yeah? Make sure the iron goes back on the silicone pad. Otherwise you're fired. We're all fired. Actually, there will be fire, so. Questions? The whole costume shop will be done. Questions, concerns right now so far. How are we feeling?
People watching the video, just leave a comment.
Leave a comment, please do. I would love that. Yeah. Like and subscribe. IntroCostumes. He's in this class now. He's our friend. Yes, questions. No, seriously. Do we have thoughts, questions, fears, anything right now, or do we just need practice?
Probably just practice.
Mostly just practice, okay? I will tell you, right now, at this moment, I always look at everyone and I'm like, questions. And I see all the little eyeballs going. And the second I turn my back, what I hear is, Lyric! I'm confused. Don't do that to me. If we can avoid ever saying my name in that tone of voice.
Only as soon as my hands are on the fabric, I'm gonna be like,
Yeah,
please.
no, it happens. If we could avoid the lyric, just for my sanity, I would be so pleased. Like, I don't know, like snap, that would be better. I'm gonna,
Just set the costume up